Okay, let's kick off our deep dive today. We're starting with a really fascinating vision taking shape out near Bengaluru's Kempegowda International Airport. We're not just talking about an airport getting bigger, no. This is envisioning a whole smart, sustainable city. They call it an Aerotropolis, right on the airport grounds. The sheer scale of this Bengaluru airport city, well, it's something else. It's located right there on the KIA premises, maybe 40 kilometers north of the city proper. And it's not happening overnight. It's planned over the next decade or so. Think about the size,
Wow.
nearly 500 acres. And they're applying these core ideas of work, play, live, learn, and create. So you've got all these different parts. Almost half the area is for business parks. Then there's a global innovation hub they're calling District DARV, plus an education and health district, a big retail, dining, entertainment village that's over 20 acres itself. And there's more. A concert arena, convention center, knowledge park, a big hospitality area, logistics parks, oh, and a central park too. Now here's where it gets really interesting, especially the hospitality side. They're aiming for over 5,000 accommodation units, Keys they call them. It's like, what, 52 standard hotels, and there's already a big 775-room Vivanta and Ginger Combo hotel set to open by October 2026, this District I Innovation Hub. That's a big focus. You know how Bengaluru startups can be a bit scattered?
All over the place.
Right, so this aims to bring them together, create something more like Silicon Valley, but right there. And they're even adding an Air India Academy. That's due July 2026. It'll train about 360 students a year in aircraft maintenance, feeding right into the MRO facilities they have. It really makes you think, doesn't it? How we even define a city these days.
It absolutely does. And what's quite insightful is looking at where the officials, the BACL team, got their inspiration. They looked hard at major global airport cities, places like Incheon, Munich, Amsterdam. But it wasn't just copy-paste. They really studied the land use mix, the infrastructure, and then adapted it for the local context. And beyond that, they apparently took a deep dive into the Singapore Smart City model, pulled out, I think, 12 specific solutions based on 5 pillars like mobility, energy, safety.
Right, adapting global ideas.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just on paper. It's already becoming a kind of living laboratory. You've got VoxelJet Germany's 3D tech facility running since mid-2022. The SITS Central Kitchen, that started March 2024, apparently producing something like 1.7 lakh ready-to-eat meals daily.
Oh.
It's incredible.
Wow.
And Epsilon Carbon's setting up an EV R&D facility, too. So things are actually happening. The whole vibrancy aspect they're aiming for. That's where the concert arena comes in. 10,000 capacity, due end of 2026. They're working with Live Nation from the U.S. on the technical side. The idea isn't just for airport users, but to pull people in from, well, everywhere. Make it a destination.
A real hub.
Yeah, and sustainability is woven through it. They're aligning with UN Sustainable Development Goals, partnered with the Indian Institute for Human Settlements. If you've got an IGBC Green City Platinum rating already. So it really pushes you, the listener, to think, how could something this comprehensive really change our whole perception of what an airport is, what it does?
And aviation experts, well, they seem quite bullish on it. Devesh Agarwal, he's a well-known name, points out it'll likely work because the campuses are right there, close to the airport. It mirrors newer global setups. He also mentions a gap, in North Bengaluru, beyond Jakor, not many good food and beverage places.
That's true. It's a bit sparse up there.
Exactly. So this project could fill that void, create a proper entertainment and hospitality zone. One expert actually called it India's first airport city because of that mixed business and entertainment. Different from Delhi's Aurocity, which is more hotels and restaurants.
Focused, yeah.
So the takeaway seems to be, this isn't just expanding the city. It's meant to be a catalyst, a living lab, really trying to make North Bengaluru future ready. Okay, let's shift gears now. We're moving into the editorial section, looking at a discussion that, well, it touches the very spirit of India's constitution. There's been this recent talk, a call to remove the words socialism and secularism from the preamble. Now, this isn't exactly a new debate, but it's definitely stirred things up again. These words, they were added during the emergency, remember, via the 42nd Amendment in 1976. And the argument from some groups, like the RSS leadership who brought it up recently, often frames it as, well, a critique of that particular period, the emergency itself.
Right. But what's fascinating about the article's perspective is its argument that these values, socialism and secularism, weren't just tacked on in '76. The claim is they were sort of woven into the fabric of the Constitution right from the start, even before that amendment. When we talk about socialism in India's context, it's presented as this deep commitment, to social and economic justice, wiping out inequality, building a welfare state.
So more than just state ownership of everything.
Exactly. It's about the spirit. You see it in the preamble's original promise of justice, social, economic, and political, and equality of status and opportunity. And it's backed up, the article says, by fundamental rights guaranteeing equality, non-discrimination, and especially the directive principles of state policy, which really push the state towards that equitable goal. Then there's secularism. The article clarifies it's not just about the state being neutral, like hands-off.
Right.
It's more proactive. The state treats all religions equally, protects minority rights, ensures no discrimination based on faith. And again, the seeds were there in the original preamble. Liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith and worship, fraternity. And then the fundamental rights on freedom of religion, cultural and educational rights for minorities. They cement it.
Okay.
Now, this connects to a really important legal idea. The basic structure doctrine from the Kesavananda Bharati case back in '73. That doctrine essentially says Parliament can't just change the fundamental core structure of the Constitution.
Can't rewrite the whole thing.
Right. And what's significant is that when socialism and secularism were added in '76, the courts considered it not a violation of that basic structure, which kind of reinforces the idea that they were seen as clarifying something already inherent. Even Dr. Ambedkar, back in '49, gave a speech emphasizing this embedded idea of equality. So it poses a really interesting question for you, the listener. When we talk about changing the language of a founding document, how much does that impact its core meaning, its historical soul, and maybe even a nation's identity?
So what's the upshot then? The article suggests this push to remove the words. It's seen by some as more than just tweaking the language. It's viewed as potentially a calculated attempt to undermine the Republic's foundations, maybe rewrite history a bit, potentially paving the way for a more majoritarian state viewpoint.
A fundamental shift, potentially.
Yeah. The author definitely argues these principles are inseparable from the Constitution's core and tied deeply to the values of the freedom struggle itself. All right, sticking with governance, but shifting focus. Let's look at India's legislative process, specifically how to make it, more effective. Parliament's where the big decisions are supposed to happen, right? Policy gets made, government's held accountable, but, proceedings often get disrupted. And a key point this article raises is about research support for MPs. Apparently, many don't fully use the Parliament Library and its research service, Lardis, which is supposed to be excellent.
It has a good reputation, yeah.
But look at this stat. Out of around 800 MPs, only maybe 40 or 50 have a LAMP fellows. Those are the legislative assistants, and even they have limited resources. So what happens? Many MPs apparently end up relying on party aides or maybe less expert assistants, and the result can be debates that, they sometimes lack real analytical depth. Now, Lardis itself, the article says it's prompt, efficient, totally digitized now. Requests have soared from 150 back in 1950 to over 8,000 in 2019. But, and here's the catch, its services are mostly reactive. An MP has to ask for something specific. And it kind of operates in its own bubble, not like a proactive, forward-looking research hub.
And that's where looking internationally becomes really useful. You see how established democracies handle this? Countries in the EU, Argentina, France, Mexico, they have these dedicated research units. And they're proactive. They prioritize confidentiality, neutrality, building up that institutional knowledge.
So what do they do differently?
Well, take the European Parliamentary Research Service, EPRS. It actually collaborates with think tanks, tracks global trends. It even puts out these cost of non-Europe reports, basically showing the economic benefit of EU-level action.
Interesting. Quantifying the value.
Exactly. Or Argentina's OCL, that specifically connects legislators with scientists to get proper scientific input on policy options. So the suggestion in the article is Lardis could maybe emulate this more proactive kind of 360-degree approach. How? Through partnerships with universities for deep dives on complex stuff like AI governance, with think tanks, maybe even experts from places like the World Bank or UNDP.
Bringing outside expertise in systematically?
Precisely. There are models, like in Benin and Colombia, they embed scholars to co-author technical papers. Egypt attaches specialists right to parliamentary committees. Sweden has this group, RIFODO, just for dialogue between lawmakers and researchers. It really brings up a critical point for you to consider. In a democracy as complex as India, how crucial is that robust, unbiased, readily available research for truly effective policymaking?
So the goal here isn't just, shuffling boxes in an office. It's a real transformation. evolving Lardis into an agile, forward-looking, and inclusive research hub. That's the phrase they use. And the benefits could be huge, bridging that information gap between Parliament and the government, making debates better, more informed.
Building trust.
Exactly, strengthening public trust, and ultimately avoiding what the article calls the staggering cost of misinformed policy, which, let's face it, India really can't afford. Okay, now let's move into the science section. And this topic is, well, it's quite concerning. We're talking about an invisible invasion, plastic pollution, and its direct hit on human health. It's framed not just as an environmental problem out there, but as a biological invasion happening inside us, with really profound health implications.
Yeah, this is sobering stuff.
And here's where it gets, frankly, a bit alarming. We're talking about microplastics, those tiny bits, and endocrine-disrupting chemicals, EDCs, getting into our bodies. Some stats really jump out. A 2022 study found microplastics in 80% of human blood samples tested. And more recently, a 2024 study in India found them in nearly 89% of blood samples, averaging over 4 particles per milliliter.
That's quite high.
It is. And they're finding these things everywhere. Lungs, hearts, placentas, breast milk, even, startlingly, in testicular tissue. Indian men apparently had 3 times more microplastics there than dogs in the same study.
Oh. And the key is understanding how these things work, especially the EDCs, chemicals like BPA, BPS, phthalates, you hear about DEHP a lot, and PFAS. They're in so many everyday things. Water bottles, food packaging, nonstick pans.
Things we use all the time.
Right. And they basically mess with our hormone system. They can mimic or block natural hormones like estrogen, testosterone, thyroid hormones, even cortisol. If they interfere with hormone receptors, they can disrupt how genes are expressed in our reproductive organs, cause oxidative stress, inflammation, even lead to cell death in some cases.
So what are the actual health consequences mentioned?
Well, the article highlights several serious areas. Reproductive health is a big one. Animal studies show even low doses of polystyrene microplastics messing with testosterone and sperm production. And clinical studies, including some from India, are linking microplastics found in semen to lower sperm counts and motility. The article notes this worrying 30% drop in average sperm count in India over just 2 decades.
That's a huge decline.
It is. And for women, microplastics found in follicular fluid that's around the eggs have been linked to poorer egg quality, irregular periods, and even a higher risk of miscarriage. Then there's cancer. The IARC, the International Cancer Agency, classifies several plastic additives now as probable human carcinogens. And Indian studies specifically have linked higher levels of DHP, that phthalate, to nearly a 3 times increased risk of breast cancer in women.
3 times? Wow.
And finally, metabolic disorders. EDCs can mimic cortisol, mess with insulin sensitivity, contributing to obesity, type 2 diabetes. PFAS exposure is linked to metabolic syndrome and heart disease too. Given how widespread this is, it really makes you ask yourself, how do we need to rethink our daily relationship with plastics? Seriously, rethink it.
So what does this mean specifically for India? It's a massive issue, right? India generates huge amounts of plastic waste, over 9 million tons a year. And a lot of that gets burned or just pollutes the environment, breaking down into these microplastics.
And ending up back in us.
Exactly. Studies show people in cities like Mumbai might be exposed to hundreds, maybe thousands of these particles every single day through air, food, water. Doctors in Nagpur are apparently seeing more kids with early puberty, breathing problems, obesity, learning issues, things increasingly linked to this kind of pollution. And the Central Pollution Control Board even found phthalates in drinking water above EU safety limits.
That's deeply concerning.
The economic cost is also mentioned. Over 25,000 crore rupees annually in India just from EDCs. Globally, the U.S. estimates $250 billion a year in healthcare costs from these chemicals.
Staggering numbers.
So, solutions. The article touches on several things. We need better biomonitoring, long-term studies, more public awareness, like, seriously, don't microwave food in plastic containers.
Basic stuff, but important.
Right. Advocating antioxidant-rich diets might help combat some effects, but fundamentally, it's about better waste management, investing in filtration tech, and really pushing for safer, biodegradable alternatives. It's a multi-pronged challenge. Okay, staying with health, but shifting from environmental exposure to the aging process itself. This next article discusses a groundbreaking Indian study. We all age, obviously, but the point here is we don't all age the same way, and that's crucial. A core problem this study tackles is that most of our medical knowledge, our risk assessments for diseases, it comes from studies done mainly on Western populations.
Yeah, the historical bias in research.
Exactly. And that can lead to issues in India, misdiagnosis, treatments that aren't quite right, because genetics, environment, lifestyle, socioeconomic factors, they're all different. Like the article, these examples, Western cutoffs for cholesterol or vitamin D or B12, they might incorrectly flag lots of Indians as deficient when maybe their normal levels are just different.
A different baseline is needed.
Precisely. And that's where the BHARAT study comes in. It stands for Biomarkers of Healthy Aging, Resilience, Adversity, and Transitions. It's launched by the Indian Institute of Science, ISC, in Bengaluru. The big aim: to map out the specific physiological, molecular, and environmental signs that drive aging in the Indian population.
Yeah, the need for this BHARAT baseline is, well, it's absolutely critical. A reliable reference point for what's normal within India, considering all that diversity. Take C-reactive protein, CRP. It's often used as an inflammation marker.
Right.
Well, levels tend to be higher in Indians generally, maybe due to past infections or environmental factors, even when they're not acutely ill.
No.
So if you just apply Western cutoffs, you might miss early signs of heart disease or metabolic issues, or maybe overdiagnose. A baseline fixes that.
So what kind of data is BHARAT looking at?
It's really comprehensive. They're looking at genomic, data-specific gene variations linked to diseases. Proteomics, metabolomics, looking at proteins and metabolic indicators that show how our biological systems are actually functioning. And crucially, they're integrating environmental and lifestyle factors too. It's holistic.
That sounds incredibly complex to analyze.
It is, and that's where artificial intelligence, AI, and machine learning become essential. You need these tools to handle such huge, complex data sets. AI can help simulate interventions, maybe augment the data from smaller groups, and importantly, help spot subtle signals that might get lost otherwise. This can help researchers figure out the best interventions before launching massive, extensive clinical trials. It really poses a fascinating question for you. Imagine having tailored health parameters for different populations. How could that completely revolutionize personalized medicine and preventative care, not just in India, but everywhere?
So the big picture goal for BHARAT is to identify those early warning signs of age-related decline. If you can predict disease onset better, you can intervene earlier. Potentially delay things like Parkinson's, dementia.
Which are projected to rise significantly.
Exactly, especially in India and other low and middle income countries. It's a huge public health challenge looming. Of course, there are hurdles. Getting samples from healthy adults across India is a massive logistical task. Securing long-term funding for something this ambitious, that's always a challenge too.
But the potential payoff is immense.
Absolutely. For public health, for truly personalized medicine in India, it could be transformative. Okay, let's move to our text section coverage now. We're looking at Tamil Nadu's healthcare system. It's often highlighted as a success story, right? Consistently ranking high on health indicators. And it presents this interesting mix, really impressive achievements, but also some underlying strains. The state definitely has a strong public health system, over 11,000 institutions, and they've pioneered some really notable schemes. One of their big ones, and it's quite innovative, is Makalai Thidi Marituvam MTM, healthcare at people's doorsteps. They literally send health workers out to screen people for things like diabetes and hypertension and deliver meds right to their homes.
Taking healthcare to the community.
Exactly. And the results mentioned are pretty good. Blood pressure control improved noticeably from about 7% to 17%. Blood sugar control also went up from around 11% to nearly 17%.
Showing it makes a difference.
Yeah, and that's not all. They have the Tamil Nadu Medical Services Corporation for drug procurement, making that efficient, the Transplant Authority for organ allocation, the Dr. Muthalashmi Reddy Maternity Benefit Scheme for pregnant women, providing cash and nutritional support, and the Chief Minister's Comprehensive Health Insurance Scheme, giving access to advanced care for poorer sections. It's quite a setup.
It really is an impressive list of initiatives, but, and this is the core of the article's warning, despite all this, there's what they call a significant brewing crisis. And it stems almost entirely from a strained workforce.
Ah, the human resource side.
Precisely. If you look at the bigger picture, the infrastructure grew rapidly, but the workforce just didn't keep pace. Not enough new posts were created, and there are big delays filling the ones that are vacant. So you get staff being stretched incredibly thin or redeployed from other essential areas.
Can you give some specific examples?
Sure. The article points out that over 2,000 village health nurse posts, VHNs, are vacant. That's out of about 8,700. And over 1,200 auxiliary nurse midwife posts are empty too. VHNs are critical for maternal and child health. They're supposed to cover one village or area, but now many are covering two or three. You can imagine the impact on services.
Yeah, that's spreading them very thin.
Absolutely. And then there's the issue with specialists. There's a shortage, especially in super specialty areas like cardiothoracic surgery, vascular surgery, and the distribution is uneven across the state. This is happening even as the number of patients flooding into government hospitals is going up and up. It really makes you think, how does a state manage this balancing act? You have these great, ambitious health programs, but you also need a healthy, supported, sufficiently large workforce to actually deliver them effectively.
So the bottom line here, and what does this mean for Tamil Nadu's highly regarded system? Well, a workforce that's unhappy, overworked, stretched thin, that can seriously hit performance. It affects patient outcomes. It erodes public trust.
Undermines the whole system.
Right. It could potentially undermine the very foundation of what is otherwise a really advanced and well-intentioned health infrastructure. It's a critical bottleneck. Okay, for our final article today, let's dive into a complex legal issue. It's about the relationship, the balance between the Supreme Court and the power of state legislatures, specifically through the lens of contempt of court. The context is the Nandini Sundar case and a specific Supreme Court order from back on July 5, 2011. So let's unpack that 2011 order first. The Supreme Court told the state of Chhattisgarh quite clearly to cease and desist using special police officers, SPOs, in counter-Maoist operations, period.
A direct order.
Yes. Recall their firearms, stop groups like Salwa Judum, and the Union government was also told to stop funding these SPOs. The court's reasoning was rooted in the Constitution. It found that using these SPOs, who were often poorly paid, poorly trained, violated Article 14 equality and Article 21 right to life and liberty.
Okay, so that was the court's firm stance. Now, what's fascinating is how Chhattisgarh responded. They didn't just ignore it. They actually went ahead and passed a new law, the Chhattisgarh Auxiliary Armed Police Forces Act, 2011. And this law seemed designed to directly address the court's concerns.
How so? What did the new law do?
Well, it created a formal auxiliary force, specifically to aid and assist the main security forces. But, and this is key, it explicitly stated these auxiliary members would not be deployed in frontline roles. They would always work under supervision and had to undergo 6 months of compulsory training. So addressing the training and deployment concerns raised by the court.
Okay. Seems like they tried to comply with the spirit, maybe?
That was likely the intention. However, someone filed a contempt case, arguing this new law wasn't actually in line with the Supreme Court's original order.
Ah, so the legal battle continued.
It did. But looking at the bigger picture implications, the article explains that the Supreme Court ultimately rejected the contempt argument. And their reasons are really important for understanding the separation of powers.
Right. Why did they reject it?
Several key reasons. First, the court acknowledged the state had already complied with earlier directions in the case. Second, it reiterated that state legislatures have plenary powers, full powers to make laws, unless those laws are found unconstitutional, ultra vires. Third, and crucially, a law passed by a legislature in itself cannot be considered an act of contempt against the court. Passing a law is a legislative function.
Okay, that makes sense.
And fourth, this is central. Legislature has the power to pass a new law that effectively removes the basis of a court judgment or validates a law that was struck down, provided the new law is itself constitutional. This power is fundamental to the separation of powers doctrine. They cited an older case, Indian Aluminium Tone versus State of Kerala, 1996, which stressed maintaining that delicate balance between legislature, executive, and judiciary. So for you, the listener, it really highlights this intricate dance. How do you balance judicial review, the court's power to check laws, with the legislature's sovereign right to make laws within the constitutional framework?
So the main takeaway here is pretty clear. The Supreme Court, by throwing out the contempt case, essentially reaffirmed a core principle. While the court can strike down laws it finds unconstitutional, the legislature has the right to respond by passing a new, constitutionally sound law that addresses the issues raised, effectively nullifying the judgment's practical effect.
It's legislative response, not defiance.
Exactly. It highlights the distinct roles, the separate powers that are fundamental to how India's democracy is structured. A really important clarification of that balance. Thank you for listening. If today's episode gave you something useful, consider following us on Spotify so you're the first to hear the next one. You can give suggestions by contacting on Twitter handle given in the episode description. We are always eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.